All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank everybody for being here this morning for our webinar, From Questions to Confidence, Connecting Students and Families to Benefits Counseling. And as we were getting ready to just kick this off, myself and the panel were just talking about, one, how exciting it was to have so many people registered to attend this, and two, just how needed a training like this was. So thank you for your time today, and we hope that it's time well spent for you. We have an exciting host or panel, including some folks that are in local school districts to talk about the ways that they're working to help families and students get benefits counseling. We have an intermediate unit TAC, and of course we have Joy Smith from AHEAD, who will be doing a little bit of an overview for you all on what benefits counseling is and how to access the resources. I'm going to go ahead and put a link into the chat for you if you haven't already received it. I did put it in the waiting room, but we do have some handouts for today from the presentation, as well as links to the resources that are going to be shared. And if any of our panelists share additional things, I will add those as well. So without further ado, I'm going to let Joy introduce herself, and then I'm going to have the members of the panel for the second portion introduce themselves.
Good morning. My name is Joy Smith, and I'm from AHEAD. I'm the project director for our benefits counseling program. I'm in my 25th year of conducting benefits counseling to beneficiaries throughout the state. And I'll let the next person introduce themselves.
Morning, I'm Mindy McMahon. I am the Westmoreland Interunit TAC or Education Consultant, specialized in the area of secondary transition. I work with a couple of the other panelists here, helping support transition planning in our county.
I'll go. Hi, I'm Melissa Cheplick. I'm the transition coordinator at Norwin High School.
Hello, I'm Heather Vera. I work with Central Dauphin School District in the Harrisburg area. I have been working with Joy for the last few years. She comes usually to our transition fairs for our low incidence students and provides information on benefits counseling. I've been in this role for about 20 years, in education for 28 years, and I am specifically working with students with intellectual disabilities, autism, and multiple disability support across our 2 high schools and cyber schools. So I just work with all of our low incidence students.
Thank you all so much. So just a quick overview of what we'll be doing today. As I mentioned, Joy will be sharing some information with you about what benefits counseling is and how to access different resources to support that. And then afterward, we'll go into a panel discussion with some predetermined questions for the panel. But if you have questions that the panel hasn't answered and that you would like shared, if we have time in the webinar, you can use the question and answer feature. It is on the bottom on your Zoom toolbar. You may have to hit the 3 ellipses to access Q&A. Please enter your questions into the Q&A feature, and time permitting, or if we don't address them in another way through other questions, we will pose those to the panelists again if we have time. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Joy and let her get going.
All right. So from questions to confidence, connecting students and families to benefits counseling. Next slide. Like I said, I work for AHEAD. There's my contact information, my email, and my direct phone number. So please feel free. I do welcome questions after the presentation. If you would like me to present in your specific agency, schools, what have you, I'd be more than happy to. So please reach out. Next. Just a little bit about AHEAD. AHEAD's been in existence since 1977. We started off as a supported employment agency, helping people with disabilities find jobs. And then in 2001, we received the collaborative agreement from the Social Security Administration to provide benefits counseling. And this was a very, novel approach back then, never had been done in the past. Most of the time, people utilize the local Social Security offices for these types of questions. So, we started this in 2001 and have been going ever since. Next. So just a little bit about numbers here. Work incentive counseling for young adults is a priority for benefits counseling agencies like myself and for the Social Security Administration. There's a lot of questions out there. There's a lot of students that are on Social Security benefits. Most, if they're receiving benefits when they're below the age of 18, will continue into adulthood to receive those benefits. And this is very confusing for the students, for the families, because it's not an easy path. But with the help of benefits counseling, we can make this a little bit clearer for people and give them the information to make decisions for themselves. Next slide. So why in 2001 did Social Security decide to do this? Well, they realized internally they've set up their own barriers to employment. I think most of us, if the IRS contacts you, the Social Security Administration, anything like that, you're a little fearful of what's happening. It sets a tone for individuals. So what they wanted to do is have outside agencies. They hopefully were more customer friendly, a little bit more approachable than having to contact the local Social Security office and ask these questions. And two, the Social Security Administration in and of itself does a lot of different work. They're helping you help for retirement benefits. Grandma passes away, you got to file the death certificate. They're doing a lot of things. So this area where it's Social Security benefits for individuals that are disabled and going back to work, that's a very small section of what they have to do in the administration. So we're specialized in that. This is all I talk about day in and day out is what happens with benefits when you go to work, what the rules are. It's tough to qualify for these benefits. I'm sure you do see the forms that come through from Social Security when students are applying, but it's a process for parents. I was just on the phone with a mom, and she was telling me that it took them about 2 years to get approved for Social Security benefits. They almost had to go to a hearing, but a few days before, he was awarded benefits. And he has a significant disability, but still, it just takes, it's a lot. And so now he wants to work. And mom's fearful of like, oh, what, I just spent the last, 2 years working on this, now what? And I think most of the general public might think, okay, you have, a disability, you probably get a check from the government. It's more of a simpler process than really what it is. Inaccurate or partial information. This, has been going on the entire time that I've been doing benefits counseling. The biggest one that I still hear to this day is, well, I can work part-time and keep my benefits. And, part-time is a very subjective statement. Really, Social Security is looking at how much you're earning per month. So what we're seeing now with rates of pay increasing, and, maybe you're working 12, 15 hours a week, but making $15, $16 an hour, that's different than, a few years ago, maybe when it was just minimum wage that you were earning. So that is still out there. I have another young lady who, she's a little bit older, but still younger. And I started counseling her, and she was working about 12 hours a week, and she thought she was okay with her SSI, and she wasn't reporting. And I told her she should report, and she said, well, I'll wait till they find out. Well, about a month ago, she started getting the letters. So her and I have been talking very frequently to kind of work through all this. There's a disconnect within the administration of these benefits. Example with the lady that I just mentioned, you would think if you're working for 2 years and you're paying taxes, things are funneling through the system, that should be, they should see that earlier than what they do. Getting better with it. When I first started doing this, it might have been 5, 7, 10 years before it would have been spotted, but it is still an issue. Overpayments. If you're not familiar with this term, it's basically when Social Security has paid you too much money And when they realize that, they send you a letter saying, hey, we paid you this much too much, and now we want that money back. Very off-putting letter to get. I completely understand that. We work through with individuals about overpayments, and hopefully with the benefits counseling happening right from the get-go, we can either lessen or eliminate overpayments in the future. But this is kind of why Social Security saw the need for this program. Next slide. A little bit about this, because this is something we do talk a lot about with families of younger individuals. Representative payee program. This is something that's kind of just within the Social Security program. It doesn't have anything to do with guardianship or power of attorney. They're not all the same. Rep payees are, with the Social Security Administration only. If you're under age 18, almost everyone has an assigned rep payee. At age 18, if you transition over to the adulthood standard, or if that's when you're first applying, you could decide if you want to have a representative payee or not. But if you have a power of attorney on your child, that doesn't automatically mean that you're the representative payee. You have to go through that representative payee process. What I always tell families also is, if you say, oh, no, he can handle it on his own, then if Social Security contacts him to answer questions about his benefits, they're expecting him to be able to answer those. So if he cannot, and some of these, when I was 18, I don't know if I could have answered some of those questions. So if they do need that extra support, it might not be a bad idea to continue with the rep payee, or at least start off with it. And then maybe as a few years go by, you can always have that removed. But this is specific to Social Security, the rep payee program. Like I said, it's not based on guardianship or power of attorney, things like that. Next slide. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Social Security programs. This is kind of just a general overview, but this is what we do through benefits counseling. We kind of give people like a 101 course on their benefits. Why that's necessary is because probably that's never happened before. A lot of individuals don't even know what type of Social Security benefit they're on. There's two distinct benefits. There's SSDI and there's SSI. SSDI, you automatically get Medicare. So that's federal health insurance. With SSI, you get Medicaid, which is state-funded health insurance. Medicaid also goes by medical assistance or MA. It's all the same thing. Next slide. SSDI is publicly long-term disability. So as we all work and we pay into the system of Social Security, into the trust fund, if something would happen to one of us, we would be most likely be eligible for SSDI if we qualified medically. This program is, someone has to have paid in to work to be eligible for this. What we also see too is if you have students whose parents are disabled, the student can qualify off of the parent's work record because the parent worked and paid in. There are some different rules related to that, but once again, all this is discussed during benefits counseling. This was signed in 1956, long time ago. And not many of the rules have changed since then, believe it or not. They tweak some stuff here and there, but the basis of how Social Security works is the same as it was back then. And when you look at this for earnings and people working that are on SSDI, back then there probably was a very, very small percentage of people working. And now there is so much more because of a lot of different reasons. But the way they have to process this at the local Social Security office is very outdated. They are working on some things, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but it's still, it needs radical overhaul to improve the whole program in and of itself. Your monthly payment is based on quarters of credit. So the more you pay in, the more you get for SSDI. The calculation is similar to retirement. But when you qualify for SSDI, there's a 6-month waiting period for cash and a 2-year waiting period for Medicare. That's just the part of the regulations. Next slide. Supplemental Security Income is SSI. We're going to touch on this a little bit more because this is what we see more of the students receiving in this age group. It's a means-tested, low-income, low-resource program. That cannot be more clear. Low income, so they're looking at how much money you have coming in each month. They're looking at how much you're saving in monies as well. It's available to children with a disability, adults with a disability, and the elderly without a disability. When this was signed in 1972, it was primarily supposed to be for the elderly population, and the subgroup was the kids and the adults with disabilities, but now it's flipped. Limited assets, $2,000. That is all that you can have in savings account, checking account, whatever we want to have at application and ongoing. The $2,000 limit is from way back when, in the 70s, in maybe early 80s. $2,000 meant a lot more than it does right now. But this is still the rule. PA Able is a great resource for individuals to be able to save more money. We'll talk about that in a minute too. But this $2,000 is ongoing, and that can, cause individuals to have an overpayment if they have more than $2,000 and that's in the bank for a few months. So just that's something that always needs to be watched. Full benefit for SSI for this calendar year is $994. Not a lot of money. It is below poverty. In most states, they will give a supplement to SSI. And here in Pennsylvania, they give a supplement of $22.10. That is automatic when you're receiving SSI benefits here in Pennsylvania. Next slide. Just a little bit more about SSI. SSI is a very fluid program. There can be a lot of changes to that on a monthly basis. Here are some of them. They look at really any monies that are coming into that household. If a child is receiving SSI and they're under the age of 18, they're looking at the parent's income and resources. So if they become eligible at that young age, they do something called deeming. So if mom or dad works and they're living in the household, that could adjust the SSI benefit for that child. That all needs reported to Social Security. So it's constantly, it's a moving benefit. This in-kind support and maintenance, this happens a lot because a lot of times when you're applying for SSI, maybe your student is 18 years old. Social Security generally asks a question, well, will they be contributing to the household expenses? And most families say no because they don't realize what that means. So that means that they're not paying any expenses, so they're going to get a reduced SSI. They would not get the $994. They'd get $662 a month. Now, you can get that changed in the future if that child does start to pay for household expenses. You have to submit proof that that's happening, and you have to line item it out. Yeah, he's going to pay X amount for the electric bill, for the mortgage, for whatever is going on. So these are things we talk about to families as well, because there's a lot of questions about that. They talk to this one, well, John gets $994, but Jim only gets $662. What's going on here? And that's the reason. Some of the SSI beneficiaries can also qualify for SSDI, and that causes a little bit of a change in their benefit as well. We look through all that with folks too. Next slide. So we're not going to do any math here today, but this is a chart that I've been using in presentations forever. It basically shows what happens to SSI when a person works, because since SSI is what they call a needs-based program, they look at all the monies coming into that household. So if you, in that first column, the person's not working, they're receiving the full benefit, the $9.94 per month. But if they go to work in that second column and make $1,000, once again, it doesn't matter how many hours a week or the rate of pay per week. Social Security cares about at the end of the month, how much has that person earned? Their SSI benefit would be $537. So yes, the SSI does go down, and that, we do talk to families about that and students as well, but you have to factor in too, you have the work money coming in as well. You have the earnings from the job. So you should have more money overall, and it just goes up the line there. I mean, in column 5, they're working and making $1,900 a month, still getting $87 in SSI. So, at that point, they're doubling what they had before they started working. And this fluctuates. So as you're working and you're reporting your earnings, Social Security is going to adjust this. Maybe one month you do get 537 from SSI, but then maybe the next month you don't work for whatever reason. Well, it goes right back up to 994. So it's going to fluctuate. So that's why you got to keep some for the families, and we talked to them about this in benefits counseling. We talked to them about, keeping records of this. This is important. You need to know where the money's coming in, because a lot of families are using the SSI for, their basic household expenses. Next slide. If the student is still in school, they qualify for this great work incentive called a student earned income exclusion, where basically Social Security is saying if they are a student by their definition, under the age of 22, enrolled in school on SSI and working, they'll exclude their earnings, meaning they won't do that calculation. They'll say, okay, well, Joy, you can go to work and make, $2,410 a month or up to $9,700 a year at your job and still keep your full SSI. This is a great work incentive for families who are really worried about that SSI benefit being affected, but you can only use this while you're a student by their classification. But if you have someone that's, starting to work, even a small job at 18, 19, I mean, they could utilize this if they're still in school till they're 21, 22. But you do have to apply for this. It's not automatic. Like Social Security isn't looking at the record and say, oh, well, here's Joy, we see that she's on the spectrum, and she should still be in school, so we'll apply this for it. No, they don't do that. You have to request it, and you have to show them proof that that student is in school. Sometimes all that's needed is a letter from the school district saying, hey, Joy's enrolled in the, 25, 26 school year. Other times they ask more questions if they're not in a typical student situation. But I always encourage people to try this work incentive because it is so helpful. And most of the students that we have that are using this hardly ever earn up to $9,700 during the school year, or I'm sorry, the year, because I mean, most students do not work that much because they're still in school, parents have to take them back and forth, all that kind of fun stuff. But this is something that they really should utilize. And in situations with benefits counseling, we've seen that they didn't apply this when the student was in school. And if, maybe they're a year or so out of school, we do recommend to the families to try to go back to Social Security and say, hey, we just learned about this student earned income exclusion. Can you, backdate it to, when he worked last year? And we've had some success with them doing that. So then the families were, receiving a back pay for that. But yeah, a lot of people don't know about this, and it's not, you have to ask for it. It's not going to be an automatic. Next slide. Ticket to Work program, you may receive, the families may receive information on this, and it does cause a lot of confusion. The Ticket to Work program is actually how benefits counseling started, because the Ticket to Work program was Social Security's attempt to say, hey, let's try to help people find employment. They had never done anything like that before. So they set up these employment networks, or our state OVR is active with the Ticket to Work program. And basically what it does is Social Security funds either the employment network or OVR to help a person find or maintain employment. And before that, it was really just state OVR, which does great things, but sometimes individuals wanted to go through a different network, and this allows them to do this. Anyone age 18 to 64 is eligible. So what could happen with families, you're either transition from a child SSI to an adult at age 18, or they're newly on benefits at 18. Social Security will send out a little welcome letter about Ticket to Work. And it's helpful to a point, but we get a lot of phone calls related to this because it is a little murky. Again, it's like, well, he's still in school. They're helping him find a job. What does this really mean? So this is kind of just like an FYI. But it is a nice program for people that do need it. And you can transfer your ticket to other agencies. Maybe you are working through OVR. The kiddos signed up with OVR and they work with them for a limited amount of time, but they still need some support. They could look to another employment network and say, well, hey, can you help me maintain this job? And then that ticket would be, once OVR closes them, that ticket could then be, it's still open, so it could be assigned to an employment network, and then they could continue services for people. It's a voluntary program. A lot of times individuals think that they have to sign up for this. They do not, but it's available to them if they would like. And when Social Security came up with this great idea for Ticket to Work, they said, well, if we're going to be encouraging people to work, we got to give them the tools to understand what happens to their benefits. So that's how benefits counseling came to be. It was all part of the legislation for that. Next slide. PA-ABLE. I can't say enough great things about PA-ABLE. It's a wonderful program for individuals to be able to save money. We talk to almost every person that we do benefits counseling on for this great program. They did just increase the age for PA-ABLE. Now it's 46 for the age of disability, which that opens it up for a lot, older individuals, veterans, things like that. But it's basically a way to save money and not have it count as an asset. It's a very, very simple idea that took forever to get going, but it's here now. A person that's not working can save up to $20,000 a year. And if you are working, you can even save more than that. There's a little bit of form, there's a form you need to fill out with PA-ABLE, but you could save even more. I have some individuals that have used PA-ABLE since it started. One younger person, his family's contributing as well. That's the other thing. Families can contribute. He has over $100,000 in his PA-ABLE. And I was like, wow. And I mean, that's great. It's a nice way, because a lot of times, we talk to families about special needs trusts and things like that, which are great. But that's sometimes the costs associated with special needs trust are a little bit much for some folks. The PA-ABLE does have some costs to it as well, but they're much more manageable than special needs trust. But yeah, I can't say enough good things about this. It's and to the other question that we get a lot is this that fourth bullet there is purchase of qualified disability expenses. Once again, people are fearful of spending the money in the wrong way. What can I spend this on? What can't I spend it on? And PA Able on their website, if you haven't looked at it, I would encourage you to, because they have some really nice resources, videos that kind of go through a lot of these questions that families have. And it's relatively easy to set up. It is administered by the PA Treasury Department, but it's run through a specific bank. It's called Fifth Third Bank. And it's I've had some families that needed to have this open so that they could move some money so that the child's SSI was below 2,000 for the assets. And going online, you set it up within half an hour. It's pretty user friendly. Next slide. Okay, so what is all this work incentive counseling? I've said that phrase how many times? So all the benefits counselors here in Pennsylvania, we are all nationally certified. That is a requirement to have this Social Security funding. We go through a rigorous initial training, and then we have to do continuing certification credits yearly. It is an intensive training program, but it's needed because, we're talking to individuals about their cash benefits, about their health insurance, and you have to be confident in what you're saying to people. So this is, something that I, take a great pride in through a head of what we've been doing since 2001. With my staff, I read every report that they write. That's we'll talk about it in a second. It's called a benefits summary and analysis. And it's a longer document. It's about 5 or 6 pages long, but it talks to them about all these different programs, the student earned income exclusion, the PA Able, what happens, the calculation sheets, all those types of things. So we make sure that everything that's going out the door is as accurate as possible. And how we get to that accuracy is we have at least a few meetings with people. Like, this is not a one and done type of service. We often get calls, from people or emails saying, well, how much can I make before I lose my SSI? And that's where the tipping point is. And we answer questions, but it's not like we're just going to blurt out an answer, because if we just blurted out the answer, they're not seeing the full picture. So typically, once we receive a referral, and we can receive referrals from agencies, schools, IUs, whomever, or parents or students could reach out to us directly. We start with that first phone call, and we gather some basic information. What do they know about their benefits? Do they even know what type of benefit they're on? Are they working? Do they have a job offer set up? Or, what the situation is. And we talk to individuals about receiving this benefits planning query. This is a key component of benefits counseling. And maybe can you, Hillary, can you advance one? Because I do believe maybe the next one. No?
Joy, it's let me.
It's stuck.
It's like making noises like it's going, but I think oh, there we go. Hold on. I may have to reopen it. Sorry about that. It was acting like it was gonna work, and then it froze me out.
Mm.
Okay. We were here. And is this the slide you're looking for?
No, the one before that, you were on it. There you go. So this benefits planning query that we're requesting, there you go. I would encourage you to encourage families to do this. I know we're talking about how to get benefits counseling started, but if you have someone that is, active and wants to start the process, getting this BPQY is key. A family can request this by calling the local Social Security office or the national number, and you're gonna, go through the prompts until you get a live person on the line. And once you have that person, you're going to let them know that the person is receiving Social Security disability benefits and you want to go to work and you need a copy of your BPQY. And Social Security mails it to the home address for the beneficiary, no cost. But and families have come to us with this in hand. And that when we have that, we have their benefits verified, we can complete the process pretty seamlessly. We do not have a waiting list for services. Whenever we receive referrals from agencies or self from whomever, we try to reach out to that person within the first 3 business days of receipt. That is a qualifier that we have from the Social Security Administration, and we are meeting that requirement. Always have, hopefully always will. But we're starting there because the idea is in their head. So if they're talking to someone, you're at an IEP meeting or whatnot, it's like, okay, well, I got this information. I'm going to reach out. I'm going to start this process. We want to also reach out and get things going. So the BPQY is key for benefits counseling. We have to have that. So if you could go back a slide, Hillary, and I'll continue with the whole model. So if we don't have that BPQY, the family didn't get it, oh, I forgot, or I didn't know I needed to do this, that's fine. In that first call, what we'll do is we'll figure out, okay, is mom going to get the BPQY, or we can get it for the student? But what would have to happen is we need a release signed. We don't have access to Social Security's system to go in there and just retrieve that. So we can, email them a release. They can sign it, send it back to us so we can get that BPQY. If the person is requesting the BPQY on their own, we see that sometimes they receive it within a week or 2. And if we're requesting it from the local offices, some local offices, we get it back very quickly. Other offices that are a little bit busier, shorter staffed, it takes a little bit of time. But we're still working with that client. They're open with services. We're answering any questions they have, but we can't perform the complete analysis until we have that BPQY in our hands. Like I said earlier, the SSI and SSDI benefits are very, very different programs. You get them for different reasons. And so when you work, there's different rules. And sometimes people come to us, they don't know what benefit they're on, or they say they're on one and they're not. And it's just confusion within the program. We talk about different scenarios. So if they're not working right now, okay, what do you want to do? What are you thinking about earning? Where are you at? And if they don't know, we just kind of start pulling some numbers just to kind of go through the process with people to say, okay, this is where you're at. And always encourage people, hey, when you do get a job or you get some job leads, call us back. You know that you're applying for jobs that are paying this much. I mean, we can run those numbers with no problem. We talk about, different work incentives that they might qualify for. Definitely the student earned income exclusion. There's other ones we talk about, but they're very specific to the person. One work incentive that we do talk a lot about is something called an impairment related work expense. And that's if the beneficiary has to pay for some things out of pocket that are directly related to the work. The top 3 ones that we always see is transportation. So let's say John doesn't drive because of his disability, but he takes an Uber to work, or he takes the bus to work, whatever. That expense is specific to John and his disability. That could be used as a deduction, which Social Security does need to know about. The other one, the other two that we see a lot, co-pays for any kind of medical, prescriptions, doctor's visits, therapists, those types of things. Also, an up and coming one is service and support animals. That can be considered a deduction because no, the dog, or we even have some cats too that we've worked with people on. There may not be going to the actual job with them, but when they come home from work, they pet the dog, pet the cat, it helps them with their anxiety. I have several people that, I mean, the cats, everything is deducted. The food, the litter, the vet bills, the groomer, the whole 9 yards. I have one lady, she's been using this for years. She has a whole system, and then, when it's the cat's birthday, he gets a special gift, all these deductions. But with this type of thing, it's not meant to sound that it's that easy. She did have to have a note from a doctor or a therapist saying, hey, yes, this is helpful for her. This is why this is. But we have to have these conversations with individuals to kind of see which work incentives are applicable to them. We address unusual circumstances, such as overpayment. Some people just come to us because they got an overpayment, or because they got a letter from Social Security asking questions about their job. Talk that through with people. That may take more meetings. We also recommend different letters, benefit management tools that they can use, because yes, they are reporting this and Social Security is administering this program, but there's some things that the beneficiary and the family have to process as well. They got to keep track of some of this stuff. Like I said, we do deliver an individualized report on everyone that we provide benefits counseling to. We do focus on youth. And we do provide follow-up. We provide follow-up periodically. We generally keep people open for 2 years from the date that we receive the referral. And we'll contact them periodically, but they can always reach out to us as much as possible, as much as they need to. Sometimes I hear from people a lot, other times, it's not that often. But yeah, we're always here. And the 2 year to keep them open, I mean, I've closed people out just to keep up the caseload, and then they call back 6 months later, we just reopen them. There's no major issue with that. And some individuals that I've been working with for 10, 15, 18 years, I mean, they keep my number. They always say, oh, you're still there, and I'm like, I'm here. I'm here. Next slide. Okay. What I always say to people when I do these presentations is people have to report their earnings. It is not automatic. It is not synced up in the system with the IRS, even though they're working someplace that taxes are being taken out. There are different methods to report. There is an app on smartphones now that you can use to report your earnings. You can report on Social Security's website if you have an account with them. I would encourage people to set up these accounts. I mean, just like everything else, more things are being pushed electronically at Social Security. You can call a special phone number to report your earnings. And last but not least, you can fax or mail or even drop off at the local Social Security office. It's not the preferred method, because the fax or mail or drop off, someone has to, manually put that into the system. So they are trying to encourage people to do the app or the My Social Security portal, as much as possible, because it it syncs up quicker. But I have some folks that are, little old school and want to do it the fax or mail. I will say this though, if you have students that are going to be applying for the student earned income exclusion, they cannot do the electronic method. They can only do the faxing, mailing, or dropping off, because you have to report your pay stubs with that, and you have to have that letter from the school saying they're a student. That has to go in every month, and the app and the portal doesn't have those capabilities. Not yet. Hopefully soon. Next slide. We're going to talk about this through the panel discussion, but this is just kind of some possible points for engagement, active discussion about career planning with parent and student. Engage in the CWIC as early as possible. We can start working with students at age 14. That may, it may be a little too early for some parents, but if they're asking questions, I mean, we're available. Utilize work incentives within the transition plan and communicate to parents and students. I mean, it's just such a necessary service for them, and we're doing all these great things with transition. It's not, you doing all this stuff to get them working, and then, oh, what's going to happen to the SSI or Medicaid, and things kind of fall apart. Next slide. So there are 4 agencies here in Pennsylvania that are under the WIPA program. That's Social Security's technical name for benefits counseling, work incentive planning and assistance. Like I said, we can work with individuals age 14 up to full retirement age. AHEAD, Appalachian Regional, Disability Rights of PA, and Full Circle are the 4 providers here in Pennsylvania. Next slide. We all have our own territory to cover. That's how we're divided out. So if you are in one of these counties that AHEAD covers, you can reach out to me directly with a referral. We do take self-referrals. Not all the other providers do, but if you're in one of those counties, your WIPA provider is AHEAD for benefits counseling. Feel free to reach out, and we can get some services started. Next slide. If you're not in one of those counties, you will have to encourage your families to go through Social Security's Ticket to Work helpline. Now, this doesn't mean that they're going to be assigning their ticket to anything. That's just the portal that it needs to go through that Social Security has developed. They have to call that phone number. They're there Monday through Friday. And when you call the helpline, they're going to ask the beneficiary some basic questions about what they wanted, demographics. And the helpline can see part of Social Security's system. So they can check, verify the date of birth to see if they're eligible, are they on benefits? And then the helpline will say, well, hey, we have these benefits counselors in your area. Would you like to be referred for individualized benefits counseling? And the beneficiary should say yes, and then that helpline will send the referral directly to that provider, whether it's Full Circle, Appalachian Regional, or DRP, or even if it's us. Like if you want to make things simple and just have everyone call this number, it still gets to us. But I always like to make that available when I do presentations, that if you're in one of the counties that we cover per Social Security's agreement, you can just reach directly out to me. But the Ticket to Work helpline will give families some basic information. Typically, the calls to the helpline are about 5 to 7 minutes long. For some folks, maybe that's all they need, but most people need more. So that's why getting that individualized benefits counseling is key. And that's it for me. I know a lot of information in a short period of time. Hopefully it made sense.
Joy, there are a couple questions that I think before we jump to the panel, I want to just put before you that were related to content you were presenting on. So the first one is, does a student's disability through their IEP count for SSI, or do they have to have a medical diagnosis in order to qualify? They wrote mental health, but I believe it's broader to like the mental health diagnoses.
I mean, it could be the mental health diagnosis. I've seen students come through with just that. It doesn't have to be something medical, but they're going to have the medical documentation from the psychiatrist or therapist as well. Can
the school's evaluation be sufficient, or do they need outside evaluation?
They're probably going to need outside evaluation.
Okay. Related to the income does that $2,000 include parents' income if the child with a disability is over 18 but living at home?
If the student is over the age of 18, still living at home, it does not include parents' income. Because once you be in Social Security's eyes, that person is 18, they are an adult.
Great. So this one is specific to the student education income exclusion. I think I got that right, the SEIE. If a student is participating in an inclusive post-secondary ed program or some public school entity program, families should apply for the SEIE program until they're 22 versus SSI. Is that clear?
So the SEIE is only for a person on SSI. So they would have had the application for SSI, been receiving benefits, and then the SEIE is a way for that student to work and still keep the full SSI that they were eligible for.
Perfect. Another question was, are students eligible for that exclusion every year between 17 to when they turn 22, or is it something that they'll have to reapply for annually?
It's almost, you almost have to reapply for it monthly, because you're going to send in that letter that's saying that you're enrolled in school on a monthly basis when you're reporting your pay stubs. So because it's month to month, so it's a little bit more intensive than just yearly.
Okay, and then I think this kind of ties into moving into the panel, but can school teams be making referrals to AHEAD or other WIPAs for the services, or is that done typically by the family?
I mean, we will, at AHEAD, if you live in one of those counties that I listed there, we will accept referrals from school districts, IUs. The other providers, they're requesting that the families would contact the Ticket to Work helpline.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that has kind of wrapped up the questions that were popping through from Joy's presentation. What we're going to do now is kind of switch gears a little bit and open up the floor to our panelists. And as I mentioned, we do have some generated questions for the panel, but if you feel that those questions aren't being answered or you have additional questions, time permitting, we will try to get to your questions as well. Please feel free to enter those into the Q&A feature, because that's going to be the easiest way for me to keep track. The chat tends to be a really active place, and sometimes things get lost in the chat, and I want to make sure we honor your questions. So my first question to the panel is really kind of around the why. What initially prompted your school or program to focus on connecting students and families to information and benefits counseling?
So I know from my perspective, I support 17 school districts in our county. So I'm not just at a school district, I'm supporting the staff at each of the districts. So when I'm out in the districts meeting with the special ed teachers, I often hear from them that there's concerns from the families expressing regarding employment due to fear of losing benefits, kind of what Joy already kind of attested to. So that's when I try to educate and inform the special educators on the program of benefits counseling, so they then can in turn educate families and the students on this service. So that way they are getting the information to make informed decisions out of information and facts versus fear.
So I can speak to for here at Norwin, we have a work-based learning program, and it filters into a supported employment kind of program after, when they're ready to go out and work. And I have had more than one family who has rejected that supported employment position for their child because they were concerned that their Social Security was going to be impacted. And so they, would not take that paid position. And so it led to having to, explain this whole process. And I refer to Joy all the time at my district in the hopes that they'll get a better understanding that they can work and be paid and it not impact them.
And the only thing I'd add on to there is, a lot of our students, they may not work until they're out of school. It depends on what the school districts are able to offer their students. I know in quite a few districts in our IU area, in my district in particular, we offer in-district employment for our students. So we have that opportunity to start working with the students when they're 15, 16 years old. Typically, they're working already. So those questions that might not come up in other districts because the students don't have that opportunity to work, we have those opportunities to discuss those things from a rather young age because we do offer our students the ability to work within our school district. So then we're having those conversations earlier.
At what point in the transition process do you start discussing benefits counseling with students and families, and how do you maybe prioritize who you're having those conversations with?
I know for me, I start back when at age the 14-year mark at the middle school, end up going to those meetings. And basically we start the conversation by explaining the ABLE account, the PA ABLE account, and help encourage the families to set up those accounts now so that when they end up at the high school at that age 18 mark when Social Security can be a thing, there's already that savings avenue in place. In that $2,000 threshold isn't crossed. I've had in the past families that maybe didn't understand that and they had some savings and then their child could not get their full benefits. And sometimes they would just spend that money to get it out of an account. And so, starting early and having them understand like this is what's coming down the pipeline. Here is an avenue that you can save money, yet still access that money, and then it won't impact when Social Security becomes available. I think earlier is better, and that's where we start. We start with the ABLE account, and then as they, age through the system, then we start talking more about the Social Security piece of it and income from work.
I agree with Melissa. I mean, when you're looking at transition planning and you're starting at 14 and you're starting to talk about employment goals, which then in turn help the team to identify transition services and courses of study that they're going to do, we're leading that student towards those post-secondary goals that include education, training, and employment. So if we're going to start having the conversations at 14, we need to start including the supports and services, which include benefits counseling. So we're making informed decisions and not working with that team and working with that student to work towards an employment goal that ultimately, when they reach that an employment age or that employment time in their life, whether it be prior to graduation or after graduation, we don't want it to kind of be like a halt because, oh, no, it's going to affect our benefits. Where if we're having those conversations from the very onset, we're already doing that informed planning the entire time. So it's not going to put anything to a halt and we can continue on with our planning.
So in my notes here, I'd said that, I'm going to prioritize those who are struggling with the idea. I don't get too into the, details of, incentive counseling and things like that with the majority of the students. Luckily, even though we have a lot of students from low socioeconomic backgrounds here, our families want their students to work. So it's just a matter of giving them the information to allow them to understand how they can have both the benefits. And it's not so much the monetary benefit that they're concerned with losing. It's pretty easy to explain that while the monetary benefit goes down, their income goes up. That slide that Joy showed with the bar chart was perfect for that. The Medicaid is usually what they're worried about losing. So that's usually what we focus around. But just from going and listening to Joy today, like I made some extra notes, and you ladies from out towards Pittsburgh just hit on this perfectly. I put at the top of my notes here, add PA ABLE information into the IEP. So I have a section of, we each have our IEP writing systems, and I give the teachers that I work with, and the other teachers actually as well have done a presentation with me. where I include all the Social Security information, the Patan item that's going to be there in the resources and the Padlet that talks about how to get benefits counseling. You know, I have all of our teachers starting at age 14 ask them to include all that information. But just talking today, there's definitely some more that I'm going to be adding in after today. But for the most part, it's the students who are really struggling with that processing of how do I do this work and keep the benefits that we prioritize.
I've been in this role since 2017 and was a special education coordinator and and a school psychologist before this. So I've been living in this space for a long time, and I swear every time I listen to something about benefits counseling, I take something new away from it. So I would also say the more you can dig in and take the opportunities to learn is another part, and share that information as well. Before we go to the next question, I'll just show that on the Padlet under resources, information about Ticket to Work as their PA Able. What I'll say about PA Able is they do a ton of free webinars all the time. And you can pretty much access either recorded or links to their webinars as they're happening, so that you can be A, learning more yourself, but B, also sharing that information with your students and families to be able to kind of demystify PA Able. And I just want to acknowledge one question prior to moving on to our next panel question is there was a question about whether students can get a PA Able account prior to applying for SSI, and the answer is yes. They can apply for a PA Able account, or a family can apply for a PA Able account for a student at any time, as long as the disability preceded the age of 46, the onset of the disability preceded the age of 46. So I'm going to just jump down and talk a little bit about, and I think this is part of the conversation that really needs to happen when you're talking with families and students. What is the way you bring these topics up, like PA Able and benefits counseling, to kind of reduce fear? Because that's a big part of it, right? Fear and trust. How are we reducing fear and building trust in these conversations? And I think some of what you said before might touch into this, like starting earlier, but you know, how do we make that more tangible for families?
I think it goes back to earlier is better. The earlier you can start having those conversations and say, hey, this isn't going to impact you today, but in a few years, we're going to start marching closer to the time where it is going to start impacting you. And I want you to have this information, and I want you to, you're not going to be blindsided. You're going to understand the terms. And then two, I offer a lot to come beside those families and walk through it with them, because they struggle. Like a lot of times, this is a whole new world for them. And so, you know, those of us who are steeped in it, I think just having us there to explain the terminology, to walk through the process, to just have some kind of organized step by step, here's what's coming next, and then provide those resources. I think that just eliminates a lot of the angst around it, and it helps them feel supported as they're walking through it.
Yeah, I agree, Melissa. I mean, I think having that relationship that you've already built with the families and kind of playing off of that and suggesting benefits counseling as a supportive, no-risk opportunity to get accurate information so we can make better decisions as we're moving forward. And emphasizing that counseling, it's neutral experts that are helping the families to make those informed choices as their students and as their children are progressing through that transition to their adult life.
And I kind of feel like I answered that. Actually, my notes for that question are exactly, I don't go into things too much. Often, again, I do only work with the students with more significant disabilities. So often they're not working enough hours where they're going to be at risk of losing their Medicaid, which again is what they're predominantly most concerned with. But when those questions come up, I have had families ask me, like, the family members are getting SSI and they're like, is that going to affect my SSI? You know, so it is really interesting the amount of information that people don't understand when it comes to this. And Hillary, you hit on it so well just a minute ago when you said watch as much of this as you can. Every time one of these presentations come up, I've always participated, and I always have copious notes after every single one of these presentations because it is very complex. And we're lucky that we do have people that we can turn to like Joy to help us with this, but we're often the front line. So the more that I think the transition coordinators, I've seen quite a few from my IU area on here today. I think the more information we can get to share, that's definitely super helpful.
So let's talk a little bit more, and I've heard early consistently through, but are there certain things you do through when you're writing the IEP, when you're holding the meeting, or some ways of documenting? How are you embedding that into your processes, or what systems or routines do you have in place to help make those referrals? And maybe even do some follow-up with families after the fact so that it's not just that one of I did it, I checked the box, I did it, but that it's actually meaningful and we're kind of supporting families after the initial conversations.
I know on my end, again, with supporting all the districts and many special educators, it's not just me, one district working with the families, working with students. So I'm more on the other end of it, trying to make sure that our educators are knowledgeable about this. Is again making sure that I'm doing a better job explaining what it is, what benefits counseling is, and how to make the referrals, and making sure that they know what information to include in the IEPs, that they have the special education teachers have the wording, the verbiage, and the vocabulary and the understanding to be able to then in turn describe that to the families that they're supporting effectively, and again as early as possible. So again, just making sure that I'm providing the information that they need. And again, like we talked about many times here, listening to these type of recordings that we have going on today, or connecting with Joy, I know I often tell special educators all the time, I don't pretend to understand the Social Security system at all. It's a very complex system. I say, you need to call Joy. I'm like, call Joy, call Joy. I say that very often. So I know I share that a lot. I know I had the head on all my slides and all my trainings. We talk about it often, and I bring it up to make sure that we are, again, then in turn sharing this information so it's getting out there as often as possible.
One of the things that I do here really is help, like what Mindy kind of shoots out to us. I make sure that all of my colleagues are getting that information as well. And so that it is in our embedded into our IEPs when it's appropriate. I have like in my role, I have like this copy and paste kind of document that has all of this information so that the families are getting the correct information. Of course, yeah, Joy always, I tell them about, where they can find her. Her name is in our IEPs, her number, all of that stuff. And again, it really does for me boil down to like the group of people that I work with is not huge. So it really does boil down to relationships and moving along with the families as they're doing it, and making sure that they know who to call and where to find the information. I even follow up IEP meetings with a bulleted list and links in an email so that that information is right there in front of them.
I said before, I put in the link to the Patan PDF that goes over benefits. Again, that's right there. But then I also have taken directly from a website information on SSI and how to get in the different benefits and how to go about that. I just heard you say that you put Joy's information directly in there. And that was another note on here. Should I add Joy specifically, because I'm in Dauphin County? Do you recommend adding that in as well as the direct link to a person instead of just a PDF on a website? Like, Joy, do you recommend for your counties to put your specific information in?
Yeah, that's fine with me. I mean, we're able to accept direct referrals. So yeah, that's no problem whatsoever.
So they can accept direct referrals, and if you are in a county that is not served by AHEAD. You could also say AHEAD and put a link to AHEAD's website. When you go to AHEAD's website, it lists Joy's name. Just spoiler alert, when you look for benefits counseling, Joy's name comes up. So each of the different providers that provide that Joy mentioned for, right, have their own websites and everything, but the kind of the way in, if you don't know, is to call the ticket to have the family call the Ticket to Work helpline, and then that'll link them to the appropriate entity as well.
One of the things I know when I talk to special educators, as far as naming a specific person, using their specific emails or specific phone numbers, I encourage people to still, that's fine if you want to include those, but I also make sure that they're including the direct line to the actual agency, whether it be like OVR, like we go to our regional office, because there's oftentimes turnover and things change and people change in different roles. I mean, I know Joy's been a staple for many, many years and can hopefully will continue on for many, many more years. But just in the hope and the aspects that that person that you have named with that email address may disappear, I always make sure that my special educators are also including direct lines to the actual agencies or phone numbers or websites or whatever it may be. So they're not hitting a dead end, hitting a person's email. I just want to make sure they're not getting crickets and then stop pursuing that agency or that service because they're hitting a dead end.
I think that's a great point, Mindy, too. And I put the 4 names of the different agencies that Joy shared on her slides. But if you click on the 3rd link under resources, work incentives, planning assistance, you can actually find your area, or you can use the website to find a WIPA. So again, it's the same information Joy shared, but if you're not served by Joy and AHEAD, you are served by one of the other WIPAs and can access similar services, can access presentations. So I think that's just important to kind of emphasize. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about impact and outcomes. I guess, what positive changes might you observed in a student or students in terms of their outcomes, or even family engagement, since putting giving information about benefits counseling and supporting families through that process in place?
I think families just appreciate knowing that they have a person that they know and they trust that they can go to for support. I have had to deal with Medicaid for my son. He is a type 1 diabetic, so I know the pain of applying for public assistance benefits. It is a horrendous experience for those of us who have had to go through it. I really didn't need it. I have good insurance, but I was fearful. What if I lose my job? His medical needs are great and they're really expensive. And, luckily because it was more of a medical, it is diabetes is considered a disability, but because it's medical, we did have a social worker from Hershey Hospital who walked us through that process. So I think just having the ability to connect with the parents and give them this information and to say, like, I'm here to help you. I know a little bit about this. I've been through this. Really helps them to feel more comfortable. I get a lot of the Social Security forms. They go to, our guidance office, our counseling office, and, we'll fill out a lot of those forms. I fill a lot of those out myself. I've had actually parents say, I want to apply for SSI. I want to apply for Medicaid. Will you help me? And they've come in and I've sat down and walked them through the process. I always let them know, like the others have said, we are not the experts, but, just being able to be here to help the parents has, I think, been the most positive thing, because we give them the information, but then just having the information is scary. So having, a person that they know and trust on their team is super helpful.
Will you use that? Yeah.
I think too, just our special educators being able to have the knowledge and be able to share that education and share those supports and services helps strengthen those relationships that they have with the parents that they're supporting, to know that there's possible things that the parents aren't thinking of. They're not thinking of some of these things. So when an educator brings it up, it's like, oh, they're helping, they're really truly helping me, and they care, and they're sharing information that I'm not thinking about now. But it helps to build those relationships and strengthen those relationships that you might have with those families by informing and educating on the supports and services that you are knowledgeable about, then share with them.
What they said, all the same.
Any, what advice would you maybe give to some of our educators who are on the call today who are just beginning to kind of explore how to connect with students and families to give them information about benefits counseling? What does it look like to just get started?
I think we've talked about it again over and over again. Any PD sessions that you see, any webinars that come through, any videos you can see, go on, ask questions. I know, again, not to be biased, but rely on your transition TACs that you have in your IUs that have lots of information that are sharing it with you. I know I try to keep up on things and try to educate myself as best as I possibly can, but then in turn educate my special educators that I'm supporting, because I know they can't always get on to everything because they're busy teaching and doing IPs and ours. I mean, they are busy with their lives, so maybe they can't get on these PD sessions. So I try. I mean, Melissa, I don't know, maybe I share too much information sometimes, but I try to be that resource person to give the information whenever possible, so that way they can then in turn educate their parents and their families on the information they're getting. But then, I mean, the more you educate yourself, the more you can educate others.
Do you want another response?
I was giving it the polite
waiting.
pause, I think it's called.
Yeah, again, what Mindy's saying, we kind of work hand in hand. Mindy sends it to me and I send it to my colleagues and try to help them along to understand, because it feels, Social Security is just very overwhelming system. And it's much like an IEP, right? It's individualized. So not everybody is going to qualify for everything that we say. And that's why we rely so heavily on pushing it out to the people who do know. And then taking a supportive role with the families as they're walking through it. Like how many families I have heard where they apply for Social Security and they're denied 2, 3 times and they want to give up. And you're like, no, you gotta, just keep trying. And, it's not uncommon to just for them to be reassured that it's not uncommon for people to apply for Social Security and not get it the first, second, third time. I've had students who were born without eyeballs that are denied Social Security. Like, and there's no right, and it feels like there's no rhyme or reason to it. But just to, go again, like push it into the hands of the people who do know, but also be there to support as they're walking through it, I think is really important.
Thank you.
This is just piggybacking on what Melissa just said, not necessarily to your question, but I always hit on that when families are asking about applying. I tell them it is my understanding more often than not, you are going to get denied and to appeal that. So just for those of you who are having those conversations, that is something that I have heard over and over again from families and from other folks in these positions. So just something, yes, definitely to keep in mind and share with families. And again, just, you can let them know it's a frustrating experience. Like I said, when I was working with my son, I had to reapply every year, for his disability, for his insurance. And I'm like, did you cure diabetes yet? Did we cure autism yet? Why every year do I have to go and jump through hoops to prove that my child still has a disability? And you do. It is, I mean, the one time we had to get our local government congressman or something involved and get all these records from the hospital. And it is not easy and it is going to be challenging. And I just simply boil that down to, because it's a governmental program and we all know that's going to involve a lot of red tape. So just helping them to understand they've got to have patience, they've got to have tenacity, and it's unfortunately not going to be easy, but that again, we're here.
So I've heard a couple just consistent themes is education and continuing to find opportunities to educate yourself. I've heard relationships, whether it's relationships with the students and families you're directly serving, or your colleagues, to be able to share information and be a resource to your colleagues as well. And then recognizing that you're not meant to be the benefits counselor, that there are people who go through a whole heck of a lot of training like Joy to be able to present and support present information and then support individuals and families through this process. So the idea isn't that you become a certified benefits counselor. The idea is that our teachers know enough about it to help families get where they need to go. And that's really the goal of what we were trying to accomplish today. We do have a couple questions. Two of them are specific to maybe resources, things you use, or templates that you use in your IEP writing system. Would any of you be willing to share your emails in the chat if someone wanted to take a look at the templates you're using in your IEP writing software so that they could try to implement some of that in their practices? And if so, please feel free to put those in the chat. So I'm going to mark those as answered. Joy, I think this next one is going to be for you. Should all students with an intellectual disability be referred to and apply for SSI and SSDI?
I mean, that's a tough question to answer. I mean, a lot of times families choose not to for whatever reason. I think as educators, you should inform them that this is an option for them, and let them know, and they would ultimately decide. I've had families that just chose not to for a variety of reasons. They felt that this was their responsibility to. It really runs the gamut. But I mean, there are certain, programs that we're not going to get into today that do need, or it helps if they're on some type of Social Security benefits, maybe sometimes the waiver, those types of things, or just, long-term supports. But, sometimes families just choose not to.
Great. This next question is, how can schools make referrals and what happens after a school would make a referral?
So if a school makes a referral to me for benefits counseling, they can reach out and say, hey, I have a student that, needs benefits counseling. If you forward me the parent's phone number, or give the parent's phone number, the parent my phone number. I have a limited caseload now. I still do take a caseload for benefits counseling, but I do manage the program. I would direct one of my staff to reach out to the family or to you and say, hey, this is, we have a referral, let's get going on this. And then my staff would, take the ball and run with it. Like I said, we have that first call with the family within, 3 days of receipt of that referral, and start getting services moving.
Excellent. If a student was in the process of applying for benefits and was advised not to apply for employment, can benefits counseling help in that context? So they're in the midst of applying for benefits and they're told, don't apply for a job.
So no, they would not be eligible for benefits counseling, because the student has to be eligible for benefits and on benefits for benefits counseling. I hear that a lot, especially if the families have secured an attorney in order to process the application. And a lot of attorneys say, do not accept a job, don't even look for a job while you're in the application process. So that's usually where that's based at, because that is not a Social Security rule. There are some people that are working, usually a small amount, and apply for benefits, but that usually comes from the attorneys that says don't work while you're in application.
I'm going to pause to see if anyone enters any additional questions. We've kind of cycled through the questions, but while we're waiting for any questions to pop through, I just wanted to highlight again what is available to you on the Padlet. The slides from Joy's presentation are available to you, as well as links to the Social Security Administration's Ticket to Work website, the PA-ABLE website, information specifically about work incentives planning and how to access it. And this would be more specifically for if you are one of the counties that is not serviced by a HED, and therefore Joy, how you could find information. You can also use the names that were on the slide and search those 3 other entities to see if they cover your county, to access comparable services. And then finally, the last 2 resources. One is a benefits counseling toolkit that Joy was very much a part of helping us to develop through our secondary transition community of practice, which was cross stakeholder group, including agencies, OVR, ODP, higher ed, you name it. We have people there kind of informing that work. So that tool is available to you. And it has kind of more information about what you as educators need to know to be able to communicate what benefits counseling is to families. And then finally, just a link to medical assistance for workers with disabilities, or MAWD, because that's another piece of this whole benefits counseling puzzle. If there are no additional questions, the only other thing I would point you in the direction of, if you are not familiar with who your who your intermediate unit transition consultant is, because that's the role Mindy plays, and I see some of my other transition folks putting their contact information in here. But if you go on the Patten website under post-school outcomes, secondary transition, number 1, the webinar for today will be stored here in secondary transition relevant professional learning. That's going to be where you can access the recording of today's webinar, and I'll have the link to the Padlet as well. But in addition, if you scroll down on that main page right here, find transition support in your area, you can actually find, by scrolling down, the intermediate unit TAC by the intermediate unit region that you work in, that supports, and they can also, oh, you're not seeing my screen. That's interesting. I really did think I was sharing my screen. Let's try that again. Thank you.
I can see it.
Yeah, I
Okay,
can see
great.
it too.
There we go. So you can, it just might be the view you have in terms of how you have your Zoom account set up. You may have to change from speaker or panelist only to include this, the view. But again, all of the intermediate unit transition consultants are there for you, and you can find their phone number and their email in order to contact them to help support with additional information as well. They're a wonderful resource to you. So before we wrap up, I don't see additional questions coming in. I just want to point out that we do need to verify your attendance today, either for Act 48 or Certified Rehab Counselor credit. So if you could please take a moment to complete this attendance verification form, that will get you the credit for today. It'll also give us information about how you felt today's training went and additional ideas for future topics. We do look to continue the conversation around benefits counseling as we continue to move forward. It is, again, a complicated process. You're not meant to be the expert in it, but the more you learn, the better you can support your students and families. And we are appreciative. And I just want to take a moment to thank our 3 panel members and Joy for their time today. It was really helpful to hear not just what benefits counseling is, but like how it's actually being implemented by schools and by our intermediate staff to help support schools, so that it made it feel a little bit more real and made it feel like something that is doable and tangible. So I know that some of our panelists have put their emails in the chat. I'm going to ask you to reach out to them rather than them sending emails to each specific person, because that's going to be a little bit laborious for them. So if you could reach out to them, their emails were in the chat. I will put a link directly to the survey in the chat as well. And I look forward to your feedback so that we can continue to provide information that is going to help you serve our students and families towards competitive integrated employment. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful day.